Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojan Huddle. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is a game-like panel discussion that is posted Tuesdays in the off-season and twice during the regular season. The huddle features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC football news. Let's first meet Tuesday's panelists, a WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways. In addition to regular season football and basketball reports, he also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC, Marc Kulkin. The editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com, columnist, national recruiting guru, and a graduate of USC, we welcome back Erik McKinney. A former William Jewell College defensive back and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com column, Musings with Arledge, and has his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show called Musings with Arledge. He's a graduate of the USC Law School. He's Chris Arledge. And a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays, The Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's the latest USC football news. USC spring football will kick off on Saturday, March 4th, the first of 15 practices, culminating with the annual spring game on Saturday, April 15th in the Coliseum. Head coach Lincoln Riley and his staff will welcome 21 new Trojans for spring ball, including 11 transfers and 10 early enrolled freshmen. Last Wednesday was the opening of February's National Letter of Intent window for the Trojans recruiting class of 2023. Trojans signed two significant players, tight end Walker Lyons from Folsom, California, and wide receiver Jacoby Lane from Phoenix, Arizona. Depending on your recruiting service, the Trojans are ranked 15th, 13th, or 11th nationally. More on this momentarily. The Trojans' redshirt freshman defensive lineman Colin Mobley has removed his name from the NCAA transfer portal and reportedly has been attending off-season USC workout sessions. And on the good news front, it was announced that the 2023 Coliseum home game against Arizona will be played on Saturday, October 7th, and not on Friday night, October 6th. Game Time and Television Network will be announced at a later date. And this just in as of Monday, Trojans quarterback and Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams announced on Monday he has signed a partnership with Alo Yoga. The fashion brand creates clothing for the studio along with streetwear. Friends, WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership. And we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly valued and it's free. And a reminder, WeAreSC.com is offering a subscription special. You can get all the WeAreSC.com premium content for just $29.99. That's up to August 31st, 2023. Or you can go with $9.99 per month. All right, let's get ready. Let's kick off the first half of Inside the Trojans Huddle with a look at the aftermath of Wednesday's letter of intent signing period. Panel, your overall assessment of Wednesday's signing of just two players at the moment, tight end Walker Lyons from Folsom, California, and wide receiver Jacoby Lane from Phoenix, Arizona. Mark, your thoughts on those particular signings?
On just those two guys?
Just those two guys, unless you know more than we know.
No, I don't know. I know nothing. Well, first of all, when Walker Lyons made the announcement, I was like, okay, that's cool. It was a great start to a day because you're thinking this day's going to be a little bit better than maybe we anticipated. And then all of a sudden, it turned out to be different. But Walker Lyons is a tight end that you're thinking, all right, Georgia wanted him, Utah wanted him. Both those programs know how to use a tight end, have showed they know how to use a tight end. Utah, particularly against USC. And here Lincoln Riley comes in at the 11th hour, pulls him away. So that's a huge, huge win. And then with Jacoby Lane, I was pessimistic that he was going to stick with his commitment, and to see that he stayed with it says that he got the other stuff that he needed to get taken care of, and he's going to be a Trojan. And he's 6'4", 6'5", Eric, whatever his. You've seen him in person. I've seen his film. That's somebody you want in your wide receiver room. And whether or not he can turn into another type of, Drake London, who knows? But you've got some clay to play with there. So, offensively, you got two really good players coming in the on the February signing day.
Erik, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's two skill position guys who are really good. Now, Walker Lyons, the biggest thing with him is that he's not going to be at USC until 2024. He's doing his LDS mission, going to Norway. It's actually cut short. It's not 2 full years for him. And so USC does get just 1 year to wait there. And so he kind of classifies, I guess, as more of a 2024 signing, but significant. And certainly players will go on missions and then end up at a different school than what they committed to. But you want to be that school, right? And Marc's right when he says Georgia wanted him, Utah wanted him. He was committed to Stanford. If you throw Notre Dame in there, those are the four tight end programs right now nationally. And so if they're all in on a tight end and you ended up with them, you've got a good player. It also speaks to Lincoln Riley's recruiting ability, I think, especially for an offensive skill guy. Jacoby Lane, again, not the splash that Walker Lyons was, because Walker Lyons was uncommitted. Jacoby Lane was committed to USC, ended up signing, took kind of all the drama out of it when he showed up in a USC polo, and he's got USC kind of signage all over his signing day event there. But I saw him, and it's 7-on-7. It was last summer, but he played against the South Florida Express team that was 5 stars everywhere, right? USC signees Malachi Nelson and Mekhi Lemon were there. Carnell Tate and Brandon Innes, big time 5-star wide receivers. His Tucson Turf team played them, and Jacoby Lane, again, 7-on-7, and it's one game. Jacoby Lane was the best wide receiver on the field there. That's the kind of talent he has, and you could tell he took that chip playing against those guys with him out there. He was as fired up as anybody, maybe in any game for that whole tournament. And it kept being like that, that's the kid to watch. So he has that type of ability. Now you mentioned 6'5", it's 180. He's got some kind of filling out to do before we start talking about Drake London and some of those big time guys. But no, he's a talent that you want in your wide receiver room. When you throw him in there with Zachariah Branch and Mekhi Lemon, those are 3 extremely talented wide receivers who give you everything, right? There's not a duplicate guy in there. Those are 3 guys that would start, I think, at 3 different positions if you put them out there. Again, it's going to be something where fans, what about the linemen? What about whatever? But no, the 2 guys that they brought in, I guess, or officially signed on that day to add to this class, big time talent guys. Walker Lyons, you're talking about a top 10 guy in California, number 119 overall in the country. These guys can play. Big additions to the offense down the line.
Chris, how excited were you to see that Walker Lyons had signed with USC?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised because all the chatter was that he was going to go elsewhere. So that was nice to see. It's also nice to see that Walker Lyons believes that USC is going to properly use tight ends in the coming years, because he must have been persuaded of that. So that was nice to see as well. And I agree with Erik. When you add Jacoby Lane to Mekhi Lemon and Zachariah Branch, it's hard to imagine a better wide receiver group than that. I mean, that is a spectacular group of talent. I mean, I've already said it that Zachariah Branch is Tyreek Hill. He has that level of talent, but the other 2 guys aren't that far behind. It's a pretty spectacular group. So that was nice to see. And that being said, going into Wednesday, if neither one of those guys would have committed, my perspective on USC's future offense really wouldn't have changed all that much. I mean, USC is going to score a lot of points under Lincoln Riley. They just are. They're going to score a lot of points every single year, a lot of points. So that's been his history, and I don't think that's going to change. But yeah, it was nice to see. I'm glad those guys are on board.
Yeah, I thought the Walker Lyons thing was kind of a shot out of nowhere. And in fact, I was very excited. I saw a film on Walker Lyons a number of times, and I said, this guy is a big time tight end. And no wonder Utah wanted him. No wonder that Georgia wanted him. And from what I read quotes from Walker Lyons, he said that Lincoln Riley assured him that they would be throwing the ball to the tight end. So that, you know, if you're going to give the kid an assurance that he's going to be there. And the thing I liked about Lyons, although I had a little trepidation about the 2-year Mormon mission, but as Eric pointed out, the fact is he'll be back for the 2024 season, which kind of is exciting. And Jacoby Lane, I got to tell you, I watched film on him. This is a guy that goes up, high points the ball, and brings it down with one hand. I mean, he did it in a number of times, and it was spectacular. I don't know whether he has top end speed. I don't even know if he needs top end, quite honest with you, with what he provides, especially in the red zone. So 2 really, really good signings. Panel, not surprisingly, on Wednesday was the delayed signing announcement of tight end Deuce Robinson of Phoenix, Arizona, Pinnacle High. Then there was a surprising delayed announcement by safety Warren Roberson of Red Oak, Texas, Red Oak High. Are these undecided announcements a good or bad sign for the Trojans, Mark?
Initially, for both, I was like, yeah, it's great. And then somebody reminded me that, you know, maybe Warren kind of delayed his announcement because of the weather issues you guys are having out there in Texas, Chris. So kind of like deflated my balloon that, yeah, he's holding out, so USC has a better chance. I don't know why he still hasn't made any type of commitment announcement yet. At this point, you know, just get it over with, pick a team, unless he's deciding to be Eric Lorig 3.0 or whatever version of these players that are doing it. As far as Deuce Robinson, I think it's fantastic. The longer it takes, it is in USC's favor. He's doing that Dodgers select farm system, whatever they're calling it. And if, you know, if there's a chance that the Dodgers want to be interested in him, you know, I think they play down the street or they're kind of close to USC. Yeah, the longer it takes, I think it's more beneficial or more advantageous that USC could eventually get Deuce. I don't know what's going to happen with Warren.
Eric, any thoughts on what's going to happen with Warren and your perspective on the Deuce?
I mean, for right now, Mark's right. The longer it goes, the more likely it is that USC can fully get in the picture or end up with them. Especially, I mean, Warren Robin specifically, that was all Texas, trending all Texas. He was never going to announce on signing day. He's always going to wait a couple days until the weekend, and now that's kind of gone on. And the latest reports are that Lincoln Riley is very much in this and communicating with him as often as he can. And so again, when you're behind going into the decision and the guy doesn't make it, that is only positive for you. The Deuce Robinson thing is interesting to me because he's talked about wanting to see where he lands in the Major League Baseball draft, but he's also sort of talked about, I want to be there at whatever, if he's going to play college football, I want to enroll for that summer program so I can get a head start and all of that. Well, the summer programs typically will start in June. The Major League Baseball draft isn't until July. So that kind of doesn't work. Now, he's a guy that I don't think should sign a letter of intent at all. I think you figure out your financial paperwork, whatever you have to do there. I don't think he needs to lock in at all, because then he can kind of make a decision on what happens with that draft and if he wants to go play professional baseball without having to deal with NLI paperwork or whatever might come into there. I know, you know, there's always a way, but it always seems like the more you get the NCAA involved, the more stumbling blocks you have to get past. I think USC has done a good job with him. I think they're very much in it. Georgia is going to be tough to beat there. I think that's always going to be a place where I think tight ends are going to look. The success they've had both at tight end and just on the field in general. But no, I think USC feels good about it and is probably very much in it for him.
Chris, what's your view on these two players?
I don't know that I have one. I'll say this, Roberson, if Roberson was waiting for the roads to clear, that happened some days ago. So that's not stopping him. You know, I don't have a good sense of this, and you know what, I'm going to save it. I was going to make a comment about recruiting in general, but I think we'll probably get to it later. So, you know, I would be thrilled to have either guy. Deuce Robinson obviously is a special talent. And I think I've been lost.
All right, I had a chance. Well, first of all, an update on Deuce Robinson. Over the weekend, there was video of him taking batting practice on Dato Field. He was in a Dodger jersey with an LA hat. Remarkably looked a lot like Aaron Judge, to be honest with you. He's obviously very big. I think that probably Deuce Robinson. I know that George is right there, but I think that you'd have to assume that Lincoln Riley's pitch with Walker Lyons is the same thing that he's producing for Deuce Robinson. And I think that Deuce may be in contact with Walker and, comparing what did he tell you? What did he tell me? And, if you're going to be making those type of commitments, but I just have a sense that if he's drafted high enough, and of course he could be drafted and then he could say, I don't want to go into, I'm not going to sign, I'll just stay out of this one and keep waiting for the Dodgers to draft him. I'm sure that if he stays in baseball, his athleticism, which is so over the top, he's going to be, taken up real quick. So I think it's, as far as Robinson goes, I think it's a good sign that he hasn't signed. I mean, if you're in Texas and you still haven't signed with Texas or where the other schools that he was looking at, and SC is still in it, I think that's a good sign. I agree with Mark. I think it's a good sign that he's going to, as far as Deuce, taking this a long way to decide what he's going to do. And I think Erik could be right too. Maybe don't even sign a letter of intent. But the calendar will be ticking on Deuce. He's going to have to decide how he wants to go about things. So, guys, combining both the December and February signings with the class of 2023, which player did USC sign that surprised you? And which player was the biggest recruiting loss, Marc Kulkin?
Well, I would think everyone's going to be in agreement. Walker Lyons was the biggest surprise of the class. I mean, it was for me. I had no idea USC was in the picture for this. So, and then if you want to talk, pick a defensive lineman out there that USC really needed and didn't get, not named Mateo Ungalele. Other than that, I guess the perception of not getting Roger Pleasant on the other side of that coin. But did they, USC's pretty deep at that position. Was he going to play this year? No, more than likely not. That's, again, I would give me a defensive name, a defensive tackle lineman name out there that USC was hot under the collar for, who didn't go to St. John Bosco, and that was the biggest loss.
Erik, surprise player, biggest loss.
Becky Curtis surprised me that they were able to get him. I mean, they put everything into him, but this is a big-time national linebacker out in Louisiana that had offers from just about everybody. And the final three was Wisconsin, Ohio State, and USC. Ohio State seemed to be at that point recruiting in a way where they got who they wanted on either side at any position. And so for USC to go into Louisiana and get a guy like that had those options, it surprised me that they were able to land him in absolutely a positive way. The other side, Mark's right. Yeah, I think that the biggest miss was landing a absolutely massive impact defensive tackle, defensive lineman. But I think locally, Dalen Austin for me, Long Beach Poly cornerback, I think he is a big time talent. They went after him and he just never really looked all that intently at USC, was committed to LSU for a while, ends up at Oregon as part of Oregon's, California recruiting hall there. I think he was a miss. And again, USC, chased him, and some guys just don't really look at you. Some guys look nationally, want to get out of the state, whatever the reason is. But I think he's a talent and would have been a big addition to this class.
All right, Mr. Arledge, who surprised you? What's the biggest recruiting loss?
I actually agree with my colleagues here. Walker Lyons is the one that surprised me the other day, just because it looked like he was almost certainly going to be elsewhere. But it's never a huge surprise when a California kid commits to USC. Tackett Curtis, though, small town Louisiana, that's weird, especially with a kid who is as talented as he is. But I suppose the fact that Wisconsin, Ohio State, and USC were his final three tells you that Tackett Curtis was a little bit different, right? I mean, this is a kid who wasn't interested in LSU or the SEC. He was interested in going to another part of the country. So I think that's a surprise. Pulling Braylon Shelby out of Texas is a big deal. That kid is an elite edge talent, and when you go into Texas, you're recruiting against A&M with their bags of cash, Texas with their fan base and their history, and the entire SEC and everybody else. So it's always a big deal to pull out a big time recruit.
All right.
I'm having issues here, guys. So I think I've answered the question as well as I can answer.
You're back.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Leave it to Arledge to make the show a little bit more exciting than it should be, but we'll carry on here. I think that I think it was a surprise to me was Walker Lyons, because I didn't think that was even in the mix, so to speak. Tackett Curtis, since that was brought up, everything had to go right for Tackett Curtis to be a Trojan. If you read about his family, and I think he had members of his family, a coaching person there, his dad. There was something about that USC connection. I think there was a family member that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that had something to do with USC, but it gave them an opening. And I think this kid is as good a linebacker as there is in the country. I am sorry. I've looked at the other guys that are, quote, the 1, 2, 3. This guy is a big version of Matt Grudegood, and he's going to be a great player for USC. As far as the biggest recruiting loss, I think that's really a plural. Any defensive player that they lost from Southern California is a big recruiting loss. Player from Long Beach Poly, player from St. John Bosco. That's impactful, but we'll talk about that later. Let's move on. Some are lamenting that USC missed on some highly ranked high school players because a large effort was focused on the transfer portal. Do you or disagree that the transfer portal is having an effect on high school recruiting for USC? And if you do, either way, tell us why, Mark.
Of course it is. And I've talked about this. Whether or not it's a positive effect, other people can offer their perspective on it, but it's giving Lincoln Riley, it's giving coaches the opportunity to say, you know what? I don't have to wait for a 17 or an 18-year-old to develop. I can go get a guy who's 18, 19, 20, who's got a year or two under his belt now, and I'll turn around a 4-8 team and I'll make him a playoff team in year one. If I've got the right scheme, everything's working together, yada, yada, yada. So how it's going to affect is, look, you've got high school recruits who are watching the transfer portal. You've got guys who are in the transfer portal securing their spots, and now recruits have to reset their calculus. All right, I was going to go to USC, now I'm going to go here. And then you got the NIL factor. So again, I'm of the opinion that more and more college rosters are going to be stocked with the transfer portal, and it'll probably be more 60-40.
Eric, what about this? Do you think high school recruits are being affected? Well, because we focus on SC here, of course, but what's your call on this?
I think NIL stuff that high school recruits are getting from a bunch of other schools is affecting it more than transfer portal. I mean, the idea that, look, so some recruits are going to schools, USC, otherwise somewhere, and NIL has nothing to do with it. They're going because that's the school they want to go to. They're getting recruited there. But we have to stop pretending that like, oh, this coach recruited this kid really well, or this coach missed out on this kid. A bunch of times it doesn't have anything to do with the coach, and he's there to kind of collect the signature when it comes in, but somebody else somewhere handled the recruitment of that kid. The transfer portal is affecting everything at all levels, right? Junior college, high school, everything, the way it's built. Now, Lincoln Riley's goal is to put together a team that can win a bunch of games in whatever the next fall is, right? So right now, this offseason, he needs to win games in 2023, this fall. The kids that he brought in, the men that he brought in from the transfer portal are going to do a lot more in that regard than all but, I don't know, 2 guys in the 2023 class nationally. So his job is to win now, that year, whatever you have to do with the roster. The NCAA allowed sort of unlimited initial counters for last year and this year. This is his chance to do it. Now, they built a much bigger high school recruiting class this year compared to last year, with the idea that maybe the initial counters start to drop back down to that normal level going forward. But he had to do that this year. You still had a ton of holes that needed to be filled, especially on defense. And he went out and brought in a bunch of guys. You're going to see more guys coming in when that window opens up again, May 1st to the 15th. So again, I think they did a good job with the high school classes, and it was built sort of where the transfer portal guys coming in, especially this year compared to last year, these are all potentially instant impact starters for USC. The guys coming in, and we talked about Zachariah Branch and Tackett Curtis. Certainly there's a handful of guys in this 2023 class that you expect to make an impact right away. But you look at the defensive linemen, you look at the offensive linemen, these are down the road guys that you want to bring in and start to establish and build that depth. But in terms of kind of guys who are going to contribute right now, that's the transfer portal guys in this class.
Chris, is the transfer portal eating up part of SC's high school efforts recruiting wise?
I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Recruiting has changed fundamentally now with the transfer portal. And it used to be that transfers were rare. It's hard to get a transfer, right? Transfers were rare. They had to sit out. Some universities like USC struggled to bring in junior college guys. So you had to do your recruiting in the high school ranks. And that means that if you got in trouble at some positions, offensive line, defensive line, and missed in some classes, that you were going to have a hole that was going to be hard to fill later, because it just takes guys time to develop at those positions. That's not the case anymore. The reality is that you look at it, USC had some questionable O-line recruiting classes before Lincoln Riley arrived. And he went out and he brought in 3 guys who are big time Division I college football players, proven guys with experience that he can plug right in. 5 years ago, you could not have done that. Now you can, and it changes everything. Yes, you need to get the Malachi Nelsons, you need to get the Zachariah Branches, you need to get Tackett Curtis, you need to get these guys who are difference makers. But the truth is, you don't have to finish number 1 in the high school recruiting rankings. You don't. What you need is you need to find as many difference makers as you can. And then 2 years later, you need to plug in guys who are second team all SEC on the offensive line, right? Like he's doing. So it's the wrong way to look at it. The model has changed.
Yeah, I think that the model has changed. I think you're right on that. I think it's still developing, though. I still am my perspective that we really don't know just how much I mean, let's face it, SC gets a ton of national acclaim on this transfer portal. Okay, it's got a life form to its own for other schools as well, even UCLA. And how these players in high school are viewing it. High school players are kind of like instant gratification, like everybody's coming in and they're going to start because they've been told they got a shot at it. But at some point, they're going to take a step back and probably be a little bit, at least I would hope they would, analytical about what this all means compared to their recruiting and how the transfer portal is going to affect their playing time. All right, let's wrap up the first half. This is a pretty simple one here. The Trojans are currently ranked number 13 on the On3 national rankings. Do you agree or disagree with that ranking, and why, Mark?
Other than that's Caleb Williams' jersey number, I don't care. I'm consistent on this. I don't think these rankings are a whole lot. You know, Chris made the point just a few minutes ago. You don't need to be number one. It doesn't make a difference anymore. Just get the players you need. If the coaching staff wants them on the team and you want to make some sort of comparison, compare who USC is recruiting against. That's the gauge. That's the barometer. Other than that, who cares?
All right, Eric, do you care? And are you in agreement that there's still number 13 nationally at this point?
I mean, that's the prep guys, right? Like once you factor in who's actually going to make an impact this year, and you talk about transfer portal guys, it goes up. But they're just outside the top 10 when you look at kind of the number. They're pretty close to Clemson, which is there at 10. And yeah, I think that's fair. Like I said, there's some developmental guys for sure on the offensive line and the defensive line. They didn't get like the big 5-star linemen all over the place. There are a couple of 5-star guys in there, but yeah, top 15, I think for that group is more than fair. You factor in, like I said, when you bring in the entire class, right? Everybody that you're adding, and you're talking about a top 4, top 5 class for USC this offseason.
Chris?
I have no idea. I don't know who's number 12 or who they have, but I'll say this. I wouldn't trade Zachariah Branch or Tackett Curtis for any other 2 players in the country.
I hear you on that one. I think that number 13 probably is where I would put them, give or take a spot, until they start hauling in defensive players. And I you know, Tackett Curtis is going to be a great player, but he's just one player, one defensive player. I need to see a number of defensive linemen. Maybe they have the answer now with their edge rushers. Time will tell. So with that,
Greg, I think the defensive line class is pretty underrated. I mean, Elijah Hughes and Green and Braylon. I mean, these guys look like they're big time players to me. And I know that there are some kids like the kid at Bosco who were more highly rated than those 3. I'm willing to bet there's no way in the world Mateo is going to be a better defensive lineman than those 3 guys. I think this is a pretty underrated group. But you know, you don't want to make a career out of having underrated classes because you got to guess right all the time. But I think this defensive line group, I think in 3 years we're going to look at it and say that was actually a really solid group of recruits.
and it could be because we have to see how they fill out. Right now they're undersized. But then, you know, you look at some of the great players that have come out of college that were undersized, like Aaron McDonald, and you know they're out there. It's about developing them. Excuse me. And I think we won't know, like all recruiting classes, really how good anybody was till 2 or 3 years down the line.
Yeah.
Which again is where you factor in the transfer portal guys, right? Like USC might get the exact same production out of these 3-star defensive linemen that some of these other schools get out of their 5-star defensive linemen this year. Talking about this year, right? When you're building that roster for right now. So that's why the transfer portal is so important. And you can bring in these guys where you see, no, I think 2-3 years down the road, we can get things done with veterans coming in, and then they're all of a sudden great players in 2 or 3 years. It's for sure a way to do it on the line, and you're not rolling the dice with a big time, you know, flashy 5-star defensive lineman who doesn't pan out,
and who you have to pay a lot of money to.
And yes, and you have to make a big investment.
Yeah,
it always comes down to the investment. Guys, this is a really interesting thing to me. I don't know if I want to call it for a halftime subject here, whether I find it disgusting, sad, but here's the deal. Emulating college players who send out a message announcing they are transferring colleges. A tweet was sent out recently, a local Southern California high school player sent out a tweet on his Twitter site thanking his high school coaches, teammates, and friends for all they've done for him. And then proceeding to announce in the last paragraph, he'll be continuing his high school football career at another school. And of course, the obligatory, I'm looking forward to my next chapter. I mean, it was like taken out of the portal transfer 101 message machine. But what are your thoughts on these high school players using social media to announce their transfer intentions from one high school to another, like they're in the high school version of the transfer portal? Chris, what do you think?
Greg, I think that you're an old man and that.
Oh, really? What gave you that hint?
High school kids announce where they're eating dinner that night on social media. Everything they do goes on social media. So it doesn't surprise me that if they're transferring schools, that's going to go on social media. I'm a little uncomfortable with the way, at least in Southern California, so much of the talent gets pulled into just a couple of programs. And I don't like it. And I don't think it's good for high school sports. So that part bothers me, but I mean, that ship sailed a long time ago. The fact that they're talking about things on social media doesn't really surprise me. And frankly, I see what these kids talk about on social media, and this is probably the least damaging tweet this kid will send, because most of what they send out is something that they will almost certainly regret in 10 or 20 years once they grow up a little bit. So I'm not worried about it.
Mark, what do you think? You're hooked into the recruiting world, seeing high school players go from one school to another. Does it bother you? Does it concern you? Or you just don't care?
The only thing, I guess, the only aspect of this that it bothers me, if it bothers me, and I'm stretching to just to make the argument, is you've got today's generation that have no idea what commitment means at any level in anything they do.
Right on.
So to now see this happening at the high school level, I don't know, if I'm a high school coach and I'm thinking, man, here I am, I'm here for these kids as 24/7. I'm their second father, sometimes their first father. And all of a sudden, the guy just thinks, I need to go develop at a bigger, prestigious, better program. And these are my words, it's not the young man, to hell with y'all. And that's kind of where we are in today's society. And so does it surprise me? No. Does it bother me? Only that we're going backwards a little bit. That's all. But it's the nature of the beast. It is what it is.
Is it what it is, Eric? Or is it like more to it than that?
Well, it's always what it is, right? By definition. Look, in California specifically, in a bunch of states, you have, and I don't know, you have where they can start creating, wealth, revenue for themselves at this age. And you want to be a brand, you want to put yourself out there, right? So if you're doing something, you want it to be notable, you want the attention with it. I'm with Chris. I have no problem if kids want to transfer high schools. I don't think you sign something as a freshman, locking yourself in for 4 years, saying I'm going to go to this school and I'm going to do this every day for 4 years. I wish that they wouldn't all congregate at 2 schools, 3 schools. I like seeing, big time players pop up at all these schools because that's the school you live next to. I also understand you go look at the facilities and the win-loss record and the production of putting guys in college, and you say, I'm gonna ride that train, right? I can put in the work and I can do that. And I want to get all the stuff that comes with that and follow in the footsteps of guys that have done it before, because I know it's a proven product and I want to go there. So I understand all of that. Chris is right. Look, I'm never going to get upset that somebody, when a kid posts something to social media, it's news to them. It's the biggest news in that kid's world. And where he goes with it is his social media page, and he puts it out there. So none of that really bothers me. It was interesting. I think the reference was to the high school transfer portal, which is not a thing, but has, I guess, now been invented. So that's the thing, right? They see college players do it, so then high school players are going to do it. College coaches do it. It's sports now, right? You go to where you're valued, you go to where you feel like the best opportunity is for you. That's how the world works. And it hasn't always been that way for high school football. It's always been, you go to the school down the street and you play there for 4 years, and then you do the best you can to try to get out of there. There's no other options for guys now, and they're for sure taking advantage of it.
It might be real quick, Greg. It
Sure.
will send a signal to this particular high school that, you know what, you better start improving your facilities. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to hang around, and you're never going to have the type of players that used to supply USC.
You know,
It is hard. You're right talking about the high school coaches, where it's like, if you found this guy or helped him get there, or you worked with him as a freshman, or you did all that stuff, and you're thinking, okay, junior, senior, we've got a guy that we can sort of build our program around. Because again, high school coaches, yeah, they want to send kids up, but they want to win. They want to field a good team. They want to be sort of there for the kid who's definitely not going to play in college, but wants to be on a productive, fun high school team. And so, yeah, you feel for them. It's also kind of the kid's life and the direction that he wants to go.
I entered the high school transfer portal between my sophomore and junior years in high school. I mean, my family moved, but I moved high schools, and that was decades before Twitter. But I think that if Twitter was around, that probably would have been a viral tweet. I think. I don't know for sure. I'm just guessing, but I think it was big news.
Your honesty is to be admired.
I've always thought so.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that grabbed me when I saw this tweet was, I'm thinking about the coaching staff, the teammates. Thanks a lot, guys, for the ride. I really love you. I mean, it's so amazing that you read 3 paragraphs where they're bearing their soul about what a wonderful place they've been playing at. And then all of a sudden it's like a fine print in a contract. Oh, and by the way, I'm leaving. And I understand the players, want to go to a school, especially in this day and age, where schools like Mater Dei and St. John Bosco, they play nationally. Who would want to be on a team that plays nationally? Plus, they have great coaches there. They have great fan bases there. And not everybody has those type of elements. But I don't know. I just saw another one, and I'm trying to remember the kid's name, but it came out before we started taping. One of the top tight ends in the country, I think he's out of Texas, has now transferred into Los Alamitos High School. And the thing that kind of got to me on this one was, it wasn't like a message like I'm praising where I've been, but this one had the artwork that you see when somebody commits to a college. And I just looked at it and I go, that is unbelievable. Not that I blame the kid for doing it, don't get me wrong, but it shows you where we're at in this day and age, that, you haven't caught a college pass or anything, but it's a big deal. So, by the way, that Los Alamitos team is going to have a lot of talent on there that SC is going to be looking at. I can assure you that. All right, let's move on. Let's kick off the second half of Inside the Trojans Huddle with the following panel. According to the experts, that would be people like On3 and people of that ilk, the Pac-12 recruiting rankings were as follows. Number 1 was Oregon. They were finished at number 8 nationally at this point in time. Number 2 was SC, number 13 nationally. Number 3 was Utah, number 21 nationally. Number 4 was Washington, number 27 nationally. Number 5 was UCLA, number 32 nationally. Number 6 was Colorado, number 33 nationally. Number 7 was Stanford, number 42 nationally. And Arizona was number 8, number 45 nationally. 9th in the rankings of Pac-10 recruiting was ASU, number 49. Number 10 was Oregon State, number 51 nationally. Number 11, Washington State, number 64. And number 12, at the bottom, was those lovable California Bears at number 75. As you look at these rankings now, what surprised you about the overall 2023 class results? in the Pac-12, Eric?
Nothing. I mean, right, like, so Colorado's higher than you'd assume based on last year, but certainly not with Deion Sanders there. Maybe that UCLA finished higher than Colorado. I always assume Chip Kelly just sort of sends mailers out to the high school kids and only recruits the transfer portal, which, by the way, UCLA, again, a great job in the transfer portal. I mean, we all want to knock Chip Kelly for recruiting, but UCLA 2 years in a row has done really well there. Maybe that Utah is up there at number 3, just because for years and years, they always seem to win with like finishing number 7 or number 8, but you know, they've recruited well enough now to assume that they're going to be there. So no, I mean, looking at it, there's nothing that is like, oh my gosh, this team finished first or this team finished last that you just couldn't possibly see coming there.
Mark, are you okay with these rankings? Do you see that somebody was ranked higher than they should have been?
I don't know, who was number 65 nationally?
What's that?
Who was 65 nationally? Do you know?
I didn't look, to be honest with you.
I'm just going to say, like Eric said, nothing. These are fine.
All right.
Nothing surprises. You know, what do you want me to say? There's so much transfer. Eric had to build up UCLA's case with the transfer portal. Colorado did the same thing. So they, you know, USC did one spot better than Colorado, who's coming off one of the worst seasons I've ever seen a football team have. So is that number is number 33 really the accurate number, or is it getting the prime time shine? What do these numbers mean?
Chris, what do you think? Did anything stick out to you as far as this rankings?
It's not a surprise that USC and Oregon are at the top. It's not really a surprise that UCLA is hanging around in the 30s and is 5th in the conference, but it should be surprising because that's weird. I mean, UCLA should recruit better than that. I mean, they had many years with Terry Donahue always recruited very well. Bob Toledo had a #1 overall recruiting class. I mean, it's
Did we lose Chris? Your voice? Are you on mute?
No, his audio is just cutting in and out. I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's move on there, Chris, so we can get your situation cleared up. I don't know. I looked at these recruiting rankings, and I know that you know, we all can sit there and agree that it really is what happens down the line. But you know, I'm looking at kind of the star player that represents the class, like whether we agree with it or not. We'll just take Oregon, 5-star defensive lineman Mateo Uiagalelei. He's a name. Players know the names. They also want to say, look, they're building. They're you know, Oregon. They're #1. They're beating out on SC, and that's the conversation for later. You know, USC, Zachariah Branch, Utah. They rarely have had the type of class they've had coming in, and they've got a 4-star offensive tackle that SC wanted in Spencer Fano. You know, you go down the line, you know, what would UCLA's ranking been had they not got 5-star quarterback Dante Moore? That's a question that I want to know. And Colorado be down at 6. They pulled a stunner in getting 5-star cornerback Cormani McClain. I mean, that was in anybody's book a stunning thing. Eric, let me ask you, what did you think about Jaden Rashada going to ASU?
Yeah, I mean, right, there's a need. He's familiar with the coaches. He's a California guy. Kane Dillingham was at Oregon. That, you know, there's a crossover there. I mean, the whole thing was so I don't know what the word is, but people want to sit right. People are going to use that as this is NIL. This is what's ruining college football. This is whatever. That is such a one-off of how schools can like mishandle something. That is not going on. His situation with Miami and Florida and all of that stuff. I don't, you know, this is like when a mom runs away with an NIL on NLI on signing day, and it's like, oh, recruiting is crazy, right? Like that just does not happen. So I think it's probably a solid landing spot for him. I think potentially, if he could do the whole thing over, he wouldn't get himself into that whole situation with those schools out there. But it's big for Arizona State. Look, eventually down the line, we're just going to talk about his talent and if he's the starting quarterback at Arizona State. Maybe not this year, but in future years, and he can play. Arizona State did well to get him.
Now he was originally going to Florida, correct?
He was originally going to, the thought was Florida, then it was Miami, then it was Florida, then there was the $13.5 million agreement that then fell apart, and that he got out of the NLI with Florida, then ended up kind of looking around, taking his time, and landing at Arizona State.
I know, and the reason I brought that up, just to confirm that I wasn't losing my mind, the idea that he could be signing an NIL for $13 million. I saw the breakdown. I think the Athletic had it broken down at $500,000 just right there for him. And then it would go $250 each year. And, he had to make so many appearances, but just the total package, that's mind blowing. I mean, that is absolutely, I want to know what did ASU do to convince him to become a Sun Devil?
Well, I think everybody realized that can't be the going rate for high school players. Florida got so far over their skis on that. I mean, everyone nationally kind of looked at that as like, this is crazy. The high school players are not getting that. Again, to try to say, oh, it costs $13 million to get a quarterback, it doesn't. It'll cost you a bit, especially like a proven transfer portal guy. That they're gonna need assurances that they can make money through NIL at your program, however you want to do it. If you want to do it for real or for fake, the new age, oh yeah, it's NIL because this organization is going to give you a bunch of money. But no, that the high school thing, I think that probably shined quite a bit of light on this, and it actually sped up bringing this thing down to a more manageable level, which everybody figured was coming in the next few years. And USC, again, that USC by its own fans gets crushed because they don't offer $2 million, $3 million for the number one left tackle in high school football to come in. And they miss out on some recruits because they're not doing that. But USC does really well in the transfer portal, and getting those proven guys, that is where more and more people are understanding that you need to pay for stats that are already there, right? You need to pay for starts and, passing yards, receptions, that kind of stuff. People that have shown they can do it, that's the investment. That's where, when people are donating to collectives or people are putting their money on the line, that's who they want to bring in. The flashy name, there's always going to be kind of the school out there that trades in that and that wants to win signing day, but that doesn't always, and people are realizing more and more, that doesn't always win you games unless you're Alabama and you can sign 10 of the top 12 kids in the country every single year.
Hey, the team that went in on that strategy before anybody else, Texas A&M, look what's happened at that program. I mean, they had two really good recruiting classes, including one that's supposed to be maybe the best recruiting class of all time, completely and utterly devastated now, right? Boom, gone. The program is dead. And 12 months ago, we were looking at this saying, holy smokes, they used a bunch of money to build out a they're gonna have the most talented team in the country. They don't. They're a grease fire now, an embarrassment now. So we'll see what happens with this, but that strategy did not pay off for Jimbo Fisher.
No, I would say Jimbo Fisher is going to have to start looking at his own job security, the way things are playing out. When you get that amount of money going in, people want results. He hasn't had great results as the head coach of Texas A&M. And of course, we all remember the firestone between Fisher and Nick Saban. This NIL thing has taken on a life form of its own, and especially now that we're getting results of what happened after the fact. Panel, knowing the recruiting classes of 2023 can affect how things play out in the future. We know that USC is going to the Big Ten. and fans probably are more concentrating on 2023 season, understandable. But here's kind of a sample size of the Big Ten teams that USC will be facing. And you think about the SC recruiting class of now, and then you look at the Big Ten's classes. Let me just give you the 5 top classes. Ohio State was number 4 nationally. Penn State was number 14 nationally. Michigan, number 19 nationally. Michigan State, number 24 nationally. And welcome back, Nebraska, number 29. Your thoughts when you look at this and you compare these rankings, and I know that we all say, the rankings don't mean much, but, you look at some of the players, and I would say that most fans don't know the players from Ohio State or Penn State, but one that does stick out to me was Ohio State. Their number 1 recruit was a 5-star wide receiver, Brandon Ennis from Florida, and SC will end up playing against him. It figures. Penn State is, got a 4-star offensive lineman, Javon Williams. Michigan, I was a little surprised at number 19, but where do they go? They got a 4-star running back in Cole Cabana. So I'm looking at some of these names. I was looking at their classes because that's what SC is going to compete against in the future. Just your overall, I'm sure it's not deep thoughts at this point. Looking at the Big Ten rankings compared to USC or the Pac-12 in general, Eric?
Yeah, I mean the 3 good teams are the 3 good teams, right? Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, like that. That's been for a while. Those 3 teams are going to recruit really, really well. I know, at Nebraska, we'll see like if Matt Rule can get things going, and Mel Tucker at Michigan State is a very good recruiter. They've kind of had some weird seasons where they were really good and then really, really not good. But no, that's USC is going to recruit against Ohio State. They're going to recruit against Ohio State. James Franklin at Penn State, I think, does a good job. And then Michigan gets its share of guys. So USC is going to have to go toe-to-toe with them. And it's going to be really fascinating to see how that works, right? Talking about Dylan Raiola in 2024, he's such a big name. Number one recruit in the country. He's out in Arizona, and USC kind of gives him that chance. Hey, you don't have to go to Nebraska to play in the Big Ten. You can come and live in Los Angeles and go to USC and play those. So it's once USC makes the move, I think it's one of those things where you have to kind of show recruits, like it might be still hard for them to imagine what USC in the Big Ten looks like going against some of those things. Like they're used to what Ohio State's schedule looks like and Penn State's schedule looks like. So it's going to be interesting, but no, it's going to be those teams. It's those teams. Purdue's not all of a sudden gonna like go toe-to-toe recruiting with USC when they make that move.
Mark, what did you think of looking at this? Did anything stand out when you compare Pac-12 recruiting and USC in particular to what these rankings look like for the top 5 teams in the Big Ten as we take a look down the road?
Yeah, first thing that pops out is, other than USC getting the USC bump nudge, East Coast bias. You compare the top 5 in the Pac-12 to the top 5 in the Big Ten. The Big Ten had the better rankings. So, but other than that, I like that USC is going to be now getting a little bit more, I don't know if you want to say a national look, because when you're moving to the big conference, you're now, I guess, you're not the Pac-12 anymore. That's always a positive. So I think their recruiting is going to get better just by joining up with the big. And you already have the brand name behind you on your helmet.
Chris, any thoughts on looking at the Big Ten's top 5 and Pac-12's 5 and where USC is sitting when you look at the top 5 of the Big Ten?
When USC moves to the Big Ten, almost every week they will have the more.
All right, we having a little bit of technical difficulties, as we like to say. if Chris, you can get back on, we'll jump right back to you. My feeling was I was kind of smiling in a way that SC was actually, if you put them in the Big Ten this year, they were second behind Ohio State, which is a good sign. But Ohio State at number 4 and SC at number 13, it's going to be about linemen. It's going to be about linemen, and SC has got to compete. I know that Penn State, their 4-star offensive lineman, Javen Williams, was just one of the top 2 players that they plucked out for their recruiting. So they were going in for offensive linemen. But I think for USC to see where they kind of match up future recruiting. And again, we're not talking about transfer portal at this point in time. So you kind of can take a look at that. Chris, are you back with us? Chris? I guess Chris has gone mute on me, huh? All right. Let's go to our final first half or second half topic, which I think is really important. I think Erik brought this up, and when I saw it, I said, hey, we got to take a look at this here. Oregon landed 4 of the top 8 prospects in California and the top 3 defensive players in California. And that would be cornerback Roderick Pleasant from Gardena Sarah High, defensive lineman Mateo Ungulele from Bellflower St. John Bosco, and corner Dalen Austin from Long Beach Poly. How big is Oregon a recruiting concern in the future, even when the Trojans head to the Big Ten? And are you concerned about this taking defensive players away, Erik?
Oregon's a problem recruiting. Yeah, the brand is established now, and it's all the kind of glitz and glamour and all that. It's got its kind of tentacles into players who, again, once you get guys to leave California, leave Southern California, that word trickles down, right? Oh, it's okay to leave. It's okay to leave. I think the best thing that happened to Oregon, or is going to happen to Oregon, is the playoff expansion. That was something where, had it not expanded, that would have been, I think, really positive for USC going to the Big Ten, because you're guaranteed, if you win the Big Ten, a spot in the playoff, which is clearly not the case if you're the Pac-12. And if you're the Pac-12 and you keep getting left out, now you can recruit against Oregon and say, hey, you're not going to go to the playoff at all, ever, if you stay going to a Pac-12 team. That helps. Now, if you win the Pac-12, even a watered down version of the Pac-12, you're going to go to the playoff. You can win. You have a chance to win a national championship. That is that's going to keep Oregon relevant. And again, the brand is there. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, even when USC goes, and even with USC having kind of all the advantages and the benefits of, you know, the more money coming in through revenue sharing when they go to the Big Ten. Oregon's they're not just going to fade away at this point, at least in the next handful of years, certainly.
Well, there's a big smile on Marc Kulkin's face. So define why the big smile, and what do you think?
Because Erik brought up an old reference, the big fade, and it had to do with Oregon back in the day. So it just brought up some old memories, message board stuff. As far, I think at a certain point, the recruits and coaches are going to start pointing out that, hey, you can go to Oregon, but are you going to finish your career there? Are they going to develop you there? Are you going to get to the NFL from there? Because the numbers, the statistics don't back it up. You look at those great recruiting classes that Mario Cristobal had. Most of those guys are gone. So I like I said, people get involved. They look at the rankings, and I'm not discounting what Erik said. Oregon's going to recruit well. You know, they've got the brand, you know, whatever you want to call it, and they're going to induce players to come there by hook or crook. But again, are they going to stay there? Or are they going to stay there? Are they going to get developed? Is the program itself a stepping stone program for coaches? I mean, Kenny Dillingham, the offensive coordinator there, was there for a year. He's now a head coach. Mario used the program to go to Miami. Chip Kelly used it to go to what, the NFL. How much of a thorn is it? If USC's winning, Oregon's not going to make it. They're not going to put a dent in USC's recruiting. USC just needs to get back to being USC.
Well, and that's a good point. But I do have some concerns about it that, look, USC cannot continue to lose defensive players, especially the top flight defensive players. We all know that's the weakness right now of the program. That's probably why they weren't in the playoffs last year. Not probably, it is the reason. And you start losing local players. I know they always talk about bridging California. Well, it starts off in Southern California, and losing Roderick Pleasant, which was actually a surprise to me when we talk about surprises, to Oregon. Ugalele, I never felt he was going to go to SC. I never felt he was going to go, but he was a name in Southern California and attracts a lot of publicity at the moment. And Dalen Austin from Long Beach Poly, I'd like to know why he all of a sudden said that's not enough. I don't know why. In my twisted mind, I keep thinking NIL up at Oregon and their collective. And we saw in our little discussion earlier about Rashida, going to ASU and, just what he got offered in Florida, mind-boggling, even though it didn't go through. But if SC is going to get back, they can't lose great players or potentially great players to schools like Oregon. So we'll see. By the way, again, apologies that Chris Arledge had to leave us. It's a technical issue, and I'm sure he would like to participate in this because we know that Oregon's one of his favorite subjects. Mark, did you want to say something?
Well, no, Eric brought up Dalen Austin earlier, had really no interest in USC. And, I'm wondering what's the name of that 2024 wide receiver at Millikan High School?
Ryan Pellman.
Yeah. There's a Long Beach coaching connection attached to an umbilical cord to Oregon. And all these guys know each other. So if SC's not showing interest in certain players, that could, there's a connect the dots type of thing going on there.
Well, it is something to monitor. And, this goes back to a future discussion about the perception of SC. And if I go there for defense, or Lincoln Riley is if Riola goes and commits to USC, everybody says, well, why wouldn't he? The guy is, even Nick Saban was quoted on social media saying that Jalen Hurts, he told him, if you're going to go somewhere and transfer from Alabama, you got to go to Oklahoma because they know what they're doing. Lincoln Riley's a great quarterback coach. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better, support on that one. But is that going to be a prevailing attitude on Lincoln Riley, that as we go forward, is that going to kind of say, this is what he is? And then all these defensive players, that's why they have to make sure they've got their ducks in a row in the future on the defense. So
you just don't need those guys anymore. Like it's the old school recruiting of, oh, you missed on a guy and now you have a hole there. It's not there. You can miss on guys, high school guys. That transfer portal again is going to open in May, and you can fill those holes every year, right? You start talking about it like a scholarship spot, right? This scholarship for 2023, you want to get this many starts out of it, this many tackles, this many whatever. And if you're talking about a cornerback right now, let's take, because there's two of them, right, going to Oregon and Pleasant and Dalen Austin. Now, USC used a scholarship on Mekhi Blackman to come over from Colorado, and he gave them, X number of this, X number of this. That was a phenomenal use of a scholarship for 2022. Now, if Christian Roland Wallace, who's coming over from Arizona, if you just kind of flip that cornerback spot and you bring in a veteran corner who plays like Mekhi Blackman did every year for the next 5 years, you're going to get way more out of that one scholarship. Again, you're using it year, than if you brought in a freshman who doesn't play as a freshman and doesn't really play as a sophomore and then maybe plays as a junior or senior. If you can get 4 or 5 extremely productive years at cornerback out of, and whether that's 3 guys or 4 guys or 5 guys, that's a way that you can do that now, where in the past, if you missed on somebody, boy, you had to figure out, who you were going to get next year. And now you've got a hole in the roster because you couldn't bring somebody in that year. So it's a different way to do it. And what Mark said is right too. If USC is going well, it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. Oregon can get kind of whoever they want. If USC's doing things the way they should be doing it, that there's enough guys out there to win with.
Yeah, I mean, you say to yourself, why does anybody have to go anywhere other than USC? Why do I have to go to Ohio State if SC is providing me the same thing? Plus, if I get
Because USC, I mean that, and we always talk about that. They spent 10 years actively trying to shun people from enjoying USC football, and so it's going to take a bit. These are kids that grew up with Oregon as the team. What you talked about, how USC was able to reel guys in even when they weren't doing all that well, 10, 11 years ago. Those recruiting classes were still phenomenal because they grew up watching USC win all the time. This group of players now, they grew up watching Oregon win all the time. So that's kind of the shift that you still have to quickly get over at this point. And I think it happens. Look at Riley. I think there's a lot of confidence that he can figure this out pretty quickly.
All right, let's start to wrap this thing up in overtime. The questions from viewers. We'll start off from Romy in Huntington Beach, California. Of all the athletes signed by USC, which one has the most upside? Example given, expected improvement potential. Jump in, guys.
I'm gonna go with the underranked guys, the guys who should be rated higher. Jacoby Lane, we've been talking about him on the show. I think his potential is through the roof. And then on the other side of the ball, I'm going to go David Peavy. Yeah,
that actually, those are two really good ones. I'm excited to watch Peavy play. I think that he's kind of gone under the radar a little bit, but I think some of the people that have watched him play or watched his film know that he's got a lot of upside. And as far as Lane as a wide receiver, but I will say this, I'm intrigued by upside when it comes to the offensive linemen who they signed. Benuelos is somebody that I want to see. They were 3 stars, if that makes a big difference, but I think so. Eric, do you have anybody that comes to mind?
Benuelos is a guy that jumps out to me. I think he's a multi-year center at USC, and centers don't get drafted typically high. So if you're talking about like a 3-star guy who becomes a first-round pick, then maybe it's not him. But I think he's big time. Elijah Hughes on the defensive line, just if you're looking at the absolute bottom of the recruiting class in terms of rankings, again, he's a guy not in the top 1,000 recruits in the nation. Quietly went about the recruiting process, not a big look at me guy. The motor, the attitude, everything you want coming in. Again, with everyone on the defensive line, it's a size thing of, hey, if they're 2 inches taller, these are probably national recruits. I think those 3 defensive linemen. But I think he has a chance, and certainly a guy based on kind of the intangibles I talked about. Certainly a guy you're very comfortable rolling the dice on. In terms of bringing a 3-star, maybe a lower ranked guy in.
All right. Question 2. It's either Renee or Rennie from Studio City, California. What's your opinion of recruiting rankings? How accurate are they?
Well, they're accurate in terms of you don't see a school ranked in the 85 to 90 win a bunch of national championships. I mean, the schools that win are up there. TCU kind of an outlier this past year in terms of recruiting ranking. But no, I mean, the good players are the good players, right? You miss on some, and then especially there's guys that just athletically peak after high school, and you just don't see that coming, and you want to hit on as many of those as you can. But the good teams are ranked highly. The good teams get the good players. There aren't a ton of guys that just shock you in terms of, I know that guy's going to be not good and then he ends up being good. But there's attitude and there's circumstances and there's all that kind of stuff that you're always going to miss on. But no, when you look at kind of who goes to the NFL, and everyone wants to say, you know, they throw out the numbers of, oh, this guy was a 2-star guy that went and whatever. But when you look at the percentages of how few 5-star guys there are and how many of those hit compared to the other ones, the rankings guys do a good job.
You agree with that, Mark?
Totally. No, look, they do a really good job trying to do their job, but those rankings are not accurate at all. We could run down a list just of USC players alone who have, you know, been deemed, and I don't like to use the term just because it busts. Max Brown is the first one to admit he's a bust. He was at one time the #1 quarterback in the country. Can't miss guy by every single service.
You know,
They're totally accurate. You should bet your life on these things.
you know, you brought up Max Brown, and I think I may have mentioned this before on a previous taping. I was up covering USC against Washington when Max was a senior in high school, and I said, okay, what am I going to do Friday night? So I saw that he was playing. I saw where his high school was located. It was kind of a rainy night, but which, you know, didn't really cause a problem. And I remember getting there, and you know, Max is warming up, and Clay Helton was on the sidelines with his briefcase. And you know, I watched Max play, and this is certainly not to degrade him at all, but he was considered the National Player of the Year. And I have seen other National Players of the Year in person, and I never thought, as it turned out, that he was what he didn't give himself the ranking, but those that do. One of the things that I've learned on these rankings, the team rankings don't bother me so much, but it's the individual player rankings that get to me, only because, and I think you guys probably would agree with me, you really have to see these players. If you're going to see them, at the minimum, see them on film, see a lot of them on film. But there's nothing like seeing them in person, knowing their character, all that stuff. So when I read about certain players, I look for what traits they might have, their character, or whatever. But I tend to evaluate players by what I see, not what others are telling me. If they're telling me about a player is really good and I haven't seen him, I want to go see him, or I want to watch film on him. But I tell you what, I want to know, is the guy that's making these rankings, what is his background? Was he a former coach, former writer? What is it? Former player? So to me, it all goes into that. Question 3 from Peter in Pomona. That's a good one, Peter in Pomona. Since you've been following USC football, who's the greatest wide receiver? Okay, who is it?
Oh, fair question, man. Listen, everyone's gonna pick a different name. I'm gonna go Mike Williams.
Good choice. Good choice.
I'd say Mike Williams and Keyshawn, but I will put Marquise Lee's 2012 season is something where I still look back at kind of the numbers and some of that stuff, and it's just remarkable. It kind of is up there for me as one of the all-time USC seasons, and so that he stands out for me. He stands out for me just in that unbelievable raw athleticism and able to do kind of what he did. But in terms of wide receiver, I'm not taking anybody over Mike Williams and Keyshawn. And I mean, Robert Woods probably is up there just as a pure overall wide receiver. There's been so many good ones.
What Marquise did in that Arizona game was just freaking unbelievable.
The numbers are absolutely wild. Like I don't, again, they lost that game, which is why it probably doesn't get talked about as much as it does, but just unbelievable when he did that.
Over 300 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Receiving.
Well, it was a sensational game. I think with Marquise, he didn't have quite the charisma of a Mike Williams or definitely Keyshawn Johnson, but what he did on the field in that particular year was spectacular. Now, Keyshawn Johnson, he was a game changer, a total game changer. You know, I don't have to go over his statistics and all that stuff. If you saw him play or go see video of him, you get the idea. Mike Williams, had he not made the foolish mistake of going to the NFL earlier than he should have, he could have gone down, in my opinion, an argument that there was nobody better than him. Like so many other SC positions, that's a hard one to say who is the greatest of any of them. Question 4 from Karen in Santa Barbara. Name one big improvement you'd like to see in the Coliseum. What would you like to see in the Coliseum, guys? What
More
improvement?
fans.
You want more fans?
That's all.
Okay, all they have to do is just win. win,
Show up.
win.
That place is pretty cool when it's full.
Very cool. Very intimidating.
I wish there was a way to bring fans closer, right? I mean, we sit in the press box and you look at those seats, you know, peristyle and up in that corner by the video boards up there. And boy, does that feel like a lot to ask someone to pay a bunch of money to go sit up there. We talk about, we want to see a sellout and all that stuff. I know there's no sort of magic wand where all of a sudden those things can shrink down and come closer and you get a better view. But that'd be it for me. Somehow, if I had a magic wand, it's that. It's somehow bring those seats down to where you feel like you're actually at the game that you paid to attend.
Well, and that's an excellent point. But then I'm looking at this car race, this NASCAR thing they had. If they did bring seats down closer, they probably couldn't make money from an event like NASCAR. But in this day and age of portable seats and pulling out seats like bleachers in a lot of, you go to some of these facilities, Mark, does the Galen Center, they are some of the lower seats. I've been there, but I haven't seen a game there in basketball. Do they pull out the seats there in the lower level?
There's no seats to pull out. I mean, there's no seats to pull out. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, in some places you can pull out the.
Oh no, this is all. It's a solid foundation.
Okay, that's
individual chairs. It's not like your old high school gym where you pull out the bleachers and the benches start stacking down. No, it's not like that.
Well, I'll say this, for this particular question, I thought they did and I still support, they did a miserable job of renovating the Coliseum. Thank you.
I thought you were talking about Galen Center still. Never mind.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I think that what they could have done for the Coliseum, they could have closed it at one end. They could have done a lot of things that would have really not taken away from the historical value of the peristyle end and that sort of stuff. And I think they really, really missed the boat, and it really hurt for fans, especially when Lynn Swan did what he did in trying to explain why you're going to get moved around and all this other stuff. Just absolutely devastating to so many people at all different price levels, boosters, super boosters, what have you. If there was one thing I think they could do, they could improve the history of USC football and put statues around the Coliseum that people will be posing in front of these statues. I mean, they have one in front of the John McKay Center. John McKay, that makes sense. But, you look at some of these other schools, especially SEC schools, they got statues all over the place of their players and their coaches. Even Notre Dame does it around Notre Dame Stadium. And I think it's very cool. All right, final question, and then we're done.
Let me, Greg, on your part, real quick, I wanted to add, because you were talking about Galen Center.
Yeah.
Don't believe for a second, and we're talking about improvements. Don't believe for a second that the representatives from the big conference haven't already been at USC and made some suggestions. I know for a fact that they've already done that with Galen Center. They want certain things done before USC starts their 2024 season with the big conference.
And when you say big conference, you're referring, of course, to the Big Ten.
Yes, and so I would assume the same thing applies. They probably came over and said, hey, what? Let's make some improvements here and there to the Coliseum as well. So when the fans from across the country show up, it'll have a more inviting type of atmosphere.
Have you heard of anything?
I haven't gotten any specifics, but when I was at the basketball game last week, this came up, because we were talking about why the curtain never opens up at Galen Center. And it's because one Pac-12 conference coach said it gave USC an unfair advantage.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
So the Pac-12 abided by this and said, all right, keep the curtain closed.
All right, keep the curtain closed. All right, last question, very simple one from Jay in Orlando, Florida. When is the next time USC is going to play an SEC team in non-conference game? I think you guys know the answer, so I'll let you give the answer.
Vegas, baby.
2024 kickoff classic between Clay Helton's USC team and Ed Orgeron's LSU team. That,
Very
at
good.
least that was the case when that thing was scheduled. It's a little bit different now. But USC actually has games against the SEC 3 years in a row, right? So 2024 is LSU in Vegas in the kickoff classic. 2025 and 2026, it's Ole Miss at home in 2025 and at Ole Miss in 2026. No, again, schedules can change and people can back out, and who knows what USC is going to do sort of with their Big Ten schedule and all that coming up. But that's at least what's scheduled right now for SEC.
Very good. Very good. All right. Reminder again, if you have a question or comments, don't be afraid to ask a comment or give a comment for our panel. Go to either the WeAreSC message boards, click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle, viewer or listener questions. That'll do it for this edition, Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. So until next Tuesday, a big thank you again to our panelists, Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, and Erik McKinney. And a special thank you to all you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Have a great week. This is your moderator, Greg Katz, saying, fight on, everybody.